Hello and welcome to Scale Your Sales podcast. Now, my next guest has worked in 47 countries and traveled to many more to gain an understanding of cultural differences. Her clients include BT and Travis Perkins, and she's currently working with an Indian university and a global stockbroker. So she talks about sexes in the boardroom and is the the UK number one global business body language guru, global business body language guru. So please welcome to Scale Your Sales podcast, Carole Railton.
Good morning.
Hello. Carole, now we're all experiencing quite challenging times with the global pandemic. What would be your advice to sellers and executives that have to ride this out and come out strong?
Well, it's a good question and obviously very topical, and it plays into my hands actually, because what you need to do is to understand the media and vertical, as we call it, and virtual behaviors and how they're different from face-to-face behaviors. So I call this going from physical to virtual. And like we're doing now, we are looking at a screen and we absolutely have to focus on that screen. We can't look away. You know, if we're in an office talking to somebody, we've got other things that catch our attention. For instance, we might see a picture, something on the client's desk, which we can then include in our proposal or in the talk that we're doing with them. But when we're online and it's just this little box and it's just a face, we have to concentrate about 98% of the time. And that is tiring. So the advice I'd give is practice this, because you need to know how to do it. And the second thing is not beat yourself up if you feel tired after the call. It's because you're so focused. You can't do anything else. And there's very few times in our life we're actually like that. We might think we're focused, but we get easily distracted or people distract us. So for me, it's a great time because people are needing to learn these new skills. You know, all the old body language skills are going. I mean, for instance, people folding their arms. It no longer necessarily means that you're repelling someone. It means that you're thinking. It could mean, doesn't always mean, that you're thinking. So there are new skills to learn. So actually, it's to my advantage, the pandemic. I know that's an awful thing to say because people are dying, but actually, it's serving me very well.
It's. I think it's really interesting what you say about the, kind of presenting to the flat screen. I've, got a keynote, and it's all virtual. The whole conference has gone on virtual. So, trying to explain to people that doing any kind of presentation in the virtual world is twice the work and twice the energy, not half. It is so tiring. You can be on stage and walk up and down and distract people and include more things, your whole body language, and you, as you say, be diverted, but you can't be on the screen. You've got to be totally focused and switch on. You can't lose concentration for a second. And you've got to keep the other people entertained and engaged as well. So the way that you use your voice and your tone and things like that. So it's brilliant that you've kind of hit on this, because a lot of people don't understand that it's so much more work.
Indeed, I think it's interesting how people have obviously had to gravitate to working online, but it's interesting that they don't see that they have to adapt. They think they can throw their hands about and do all this business. Your hands are over 2.5 times the size of your face. So if you are using your hands, and I notice you do and I do, we're both really energetic in our movements, then you need to keep them fairly low and you need to keep them to the side, because if your hands are this level, it's where you start to fight actually. It's really good now that everybody has to watch this, isn't it? But if you keep, it requires you to move your arms slightly further back and have them at a slightly lower level so that you don't initiate this fight pose. And there are things like that. And people who are energetic and who do walk up and down the stage, as it seems you do and I do. I remember being at Google, it was like being on a runway. The stage was so long. I was in my element. I loved it. And it coincidentally, they had massive screens behind with my face on it. You know, I was on stage, I was the same size as my nose was behind me. It was incredible. So if you ever get a chance to do something there, go for it. It's fantastic. So yes, those are quite easy because we've been doing those for years. Now we have to adapt, and we have to be quicker in our thought process as well, because people want answers straight away. They're in a hurry to get onto the next call, you know, and in a sales scenario, then the client, as we know, has got much more information, that they're at home. Maybe their partner's feeding them information now about products that they didn't know. You know, work and home life are overlapping. And so they are more informed and will require results and reactions much more quickly.
So I suppose the thing is really, as you say, you've got to practice and rehearse, but you've got to prepare even more. You know, thinking about just really focusing on what is the objective of what I'm doing, and what is the need, or how am I best serving that person, and what are the questions they're likely to have that they may not say. So you've really got to kind of focus in and prepare. So, you know, tell me, because I'm really interested, how did you go from selling encyclopedias to the #1 UK body language expert? I mean, really, it's quite a journey, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I sold encyclopedias when I was an old hippie, or a young hippie, actually. I'm an old hippie now. So I was living and traveling in Africa, and I was in South Africa selling encyclopedias in an Afrikaans-speaking area, actually. So I didn't even speak the language, and there were no TVs then in South Africa. We had it in the UK, but it wasn't happening in South Africa. And so it was relatively easy. Everyone, well, I'll tell you what I did. Everyone is interested in their children. So I was asking questions when I knocked on doors. Have you got any children? Would you like them to know more? It was quite simple when I hit on that. So I was selling these massive, I think there were about 14, 15 volumes in this, completely out of date by the time they got them, you know. And when I realized that people bought things for their kids, that's what I did. I just used to sell it for their children, really. And then I got serious, and I got jobs, and I did a marketing diploma in Cape Town. And I came through Redeployment. I worked for. I became the general manager of Central London, managing 7 branches. And I got headhunted to go back to South Africa and set up an agency. And I joined Xerox, and I was there for 11 years, working through sales training, sales, and then running the Middle East sales and marketing. So we didn't get the business. I didn't understand why we didn't get the business. My interpreter was telling me something different to what I was reading with the body language. So I set myself a task to learn body language. I even asked my boss when I told him we hadn't got the business, which wasn't easy, could I go on a body language course? And he thought I'd gone completely mad. But I now know that that was the right decision, and it came from failure, like lots of things do, really. I needed to know the body language because I couldn't speak the language. I knew that I could get more information from the body language. And I just studied away. I even learned, I'm a qualified homeopath as well, because they have, one of their diagnostics is face reading. So I wanted to learn about the face reading, and the guy said you can only do the whole course, and I did. So I've worked really hard, and I put my neck on the block, because when I started nearly 20 years ago now, no one was talking about the breath as an indicator of body language. And the breath is an indicator of life, you know, and it changes at different occasions in your life, you know, changes when you meet someone, when you're excited, when you're nervous, it's got sexual changes, everything, it revolves around the breath. And you can only live for 3 minutes without breath. So I started writing about that, and I got my name known, and now everybody writes about it. And more recently, you alluded to it in the introduction, the difference between men and women in the boardroom is of interest to me. There is a difference, and we need to handle that. We need to address it. And one of the things is that women make more moves than men, okay? And people in senior positions make less moves. So even when people, or women I should say, even when women are in senior positions, they're not seen as in that position because they're still making more moves. And let me just say, I really need to say this, I do not stop women making those moves. I change them to regal moves. So if you like, we're in the UK, so like the Queen, she moves very slowly. So it's about moving regally rather than stopping the moves.
So tell me about your book, The Future of Body Language, How to Perform Effectively on Multimedia. Now, you mentioned a bit of this before, but, you know, give us more examples about how, from a physical world to a virtual world, some of the behaviors that people need to demonstrate now.
Okay, first of all, it's important to say it's written for baby boomers, Generation X and Generation Y, because all of those generations behave in a different way. And what I do is I segregate it into different types of multimedia, podcasts, conference calls, that sort of thing, where you might be able to see more of a person than you can now, just one-to-one. What I'm looking for is, we talked about it earlier, the preparation for these calls. Because if you turn up all Boris Johnson-y, let's say, hair all over the place and that sort of thing, for me, that doesn't actually work unless you're communicating with someone who's exactly the same. So it shows you and gives you tips and exercises that you can practice before you go online. For instance, if you imagine a crown on your head, what happens if you try that now? It means your back straightens and your lungs open as a result. So you have more breath, more energy, and more control about what's going on.
So how does that work in the kind of virtual world? You know, would you still imagine before you go on, you know, the crown, or how does that work?
Yes, absolutely. This is far more important for the virtual world, because what you're doing is making sure that your head is balanced on your spine and that you are relaxed. You can't, you know, if you're out of sync, the crown won't stay up. So you must imagine the crown on your head. You could walk to your desk, walk to your chair, imagining the crown's on your head, which will keep you very straight and upright. Or you can do it when you sit down. It doesn't matter. Both work. But it's particularly valuable for going online.
Right. Okay. So what practical strategy could you offer that enables buyers to buy, that really builds long-term trusted relationships?
Okay, there is a misconception about mimicking. We all, as experienced one, know that, you know, someone's doing this. We can't sit there and do that. It just doesn't work. And this goes back to what I said earlier. It's actually the breath that you need to mimic, not the movement, the breath. Because if you get in sync with somebody's breath, you're really inside their body, you're really inside their head. So if you can follow the breath, and you do it by looking at this area of someone's body, these like holes here, and it takes time. Most things are body language, you just need to change something, adapt something. But this takes real focus and a lot of time and effort to do. But it works every time. If you can follow the pauses of the person you're communicating with and want to influence, then you are running at the same level, the same vibration, and they actually rightly or wrongly, don't necessarily know what's going on. So you have control.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I do a meditation and yoga, and it's interesting that often people are not aware of how they breathe or their own breath, or they're not aware that their breath is racing, or, you know, how to slow it down and relax. So I think this is a brilliant strategy of yours, if only to make you aware of your own breath, because you've got to be aware of that in order to then match the rhythm of someone else's breath as well, and know how to control your own breath. Really interesting.
Well, if you, a very quick, I know you asked me to say, a very quick thing is, if someone is talking very quickly and is very angry, if you start talking at that level with them, then you can slow it down, you know, so that they do change their breath, and you can then get into a pattern that's acceptable to both of you. If you have children, it's really good when you're having a row with a child or trying to control a child or get it to go to bed or something like that. When they screaming and shouting, go into that tantrum, their breathing pattern, and then control the breathing. And then both of you will be calm, and hopefully the child will go to bed. So it works in business as well as at home. And we are more at home now. Yeah. It's
interesting, like follow your leader. I really like that. Go at their level and then control it, bring it down. Yeah. Love it. Yeah. Love it. So what tried and tested strategy would you offer listeners about scaling their sales?
The thing about sales, if there is still human interaction, is that you need to be trusted, believable, and have a connection with your client at all sorts of levels, or just one that turns them on. There's generally always a human at the end of a sale somewhere, a big sale anyway. So I think I would want you to gain the trust of your client really early on, so that that client becomes a buyer ongoing, and for as long as you have products or services that they would use or utilize. So it is, again, it's about being stable. Having both feet on the ground helps as well. If you're really nervous, if it's a really big client and you have to get the business, you've never met them before, I would again suggest trying on the crown before you meet them or before you go online. This takes your level of anxiety down, and your breathing becomes rhythmic and normal. And when you understand yourself, as you said earlier, then you can go forward to the client. And only when you can control yourself and understand what's going on in your body and your mind can you offer assistance to a potential client. It won't happen if you're still screwed up about different things. I call it Humpty Dumpty, actually. You have to open yourself up and explore lots of different areas of yourself, including your breath. And then you can put yourself back together and you'll be whole and complete. And your offering to new clients, existing clients, is completely different, because they have an expectation of how you're going to act, what you're going to do, what you're going to say. And you're not going to do that anymore. You know, you're going to let them talk more. You're going to feel comfortable. And you are even open to them saying no, final no. You know, you know that you can walk away.
Sales is very much about your own emotional status. It's really difficult to sell and get in the zone of things if you're for whatever things going on in your own head. So you've got to be very confident and comfortable with yourself, but yes, and be able to deal with whatever comes at you. So I really love the strategies that you've given, in that the Humpty Dumpty, you know, kind of take yourself apart and really understand yourself and use a lot of the strategies. So, you know, the listeners must go to your book so that they can yes, practice many of the strategies. Now, how can they get hold of the book?
I prefer them not to buy it from Amazon, because you might know Amazon pay you a penny for a book these days. So they can drop me a line at Carole Railton. I'll say the easy email, caroleRailton@icloud.com, and I can just send out the form and we can send it in paperback, or it's online as well. And people can get hold of me, obviously, at LinkedIn, Carole Railton. There are a couple of Carole Railtons, but I'm the only one with FRSA at the end of my name. And there is a picture, and I'm not so different. I probably won't see so many wrinkles, but I think you'd recognize me from the picture.
So, Carole, if you're on a desert island, what was the one thing you take with you?
Apart from Brad Pitt.
Well, I think he's in demand, really.
If I can't persuade him, I think I'd take a knife, because finding a stone like a flint would take some time, and I'd like to obviously make some costumes so I could wear, make a shelter. I've actually done a course on this, so it's quite interesting.
You've done a course on what?
On being marooned. Honestly, it was
what are the chances of that, really?
I know. That's why I was so comfortable answering your question, because I know. And the other thing, I mean, you said only one thing, but the one thing, you need covering to stay away from the sun and things like that. The other thing that they taught us was that if you had a mirror, that would be very useful, because you could start a fire with a mirror. So we learned how to do that as well. I have to, maybe I should tell you why I did that course.
Yes, tell us why.
If you'll keep this in, but I was a student in Indonesia, in Java. I studied gamelan, which is Indonesian music, and I volunteered for the Indonesian rainforest, and I used to lead a tour through the Indonesian rainforest, and they taught me what to do with snake bites and things like that. I mean, 70% of people, for instance, that die from snake bites die from shock, not from poison. It was a fascinating course, actually. Fascinating. So, and during that time, in case something happened, in case the truck didn't come back that dropped us off, I had to learn all these things. Luckily, I never had to try them out, because it's great being in a classroom and understanding the practicalities, but actually doing it, who knows?
I think I'm coming on that desert island with you, because you know what you're doing.
Well, it'd be good to try it out, I have to say. I think it would be quite good, to try it out, because I haven't had an opportunity to, so yeah.
It's interesting talking about understanding yourself. I've got a hippo story, and when I tell it, there was one thing that I then, at that point, really understood how I am able to deal with challenging situations.
Yeah.
You know, the complete unknown, death, you know, that it could have ended quite badly. And because I had a few other people with me, and we all reacted in very different ways. And it's really difficult to know. I mean, you have all the training, don't you? Yeah. It's actually in the real life situation, when something happens, you don't know how you're going to react. So maybe we'll throw you onto a desert island and see.
Yes, I'd like to do that. I've had a good life. I really do.
Yeah, Carole, you need to write a book about all these stories that you've got.
It's on its way. Yeah.
Brilliant. You've been a wonderful guest. Thank you for being a guest on Scale Your Sales podcast, Carole Railton.
Thank you so much.